Imagine settling into your airplane seat, ready for a peaceful flight, when suddenly the passenger behind you keeps kicking your chair nonstop. Annoying, right? But what if I told you this wasn't just about legroom, it was about hate? On this flight, a white woman kept kicking a black man's seat, mocking him loudly, not realizing who he really was. By the end of the flight, her world was turned upside down. Let me tell you exactly how it happened. You won't believe what happened on this flight. Picture this. A busy airport. People rushing to catch their flights. The sound of rolling suitcases echoing across the terminal. Among the crowd was Jamal, a successful attorney who had just wrapped up an important case in New York. He was exhausted, but looking forward to a quiet flight to Los Angeles. All he wanted was a few hours of rest before his next meeting. He boarded the plane, greeted the flight attendants with a polite smile, and made his way to his seat in business class. The cabin smelled faintly of coffee and fresh linen. Passengers were settling in, placing bags in the overhead compartments, adjusting their seats, and preparing for takeoff. Everything seemed normal, until it wasn't. As Jamal leaned back in his seat, he suddenly felt a sharp thud against his back. He frowned, thinking it was an accident. Maybe the person behind him had bumped the seat while getting comfortable. But then came another kick, and another. The jolts weren't random. They were deliberate. Jamal turned around, calm but curious, and saw a woman sitting directly behind him. She looked to be in her early 50s, with neatly styled blonde hair and a sharp expression on her face. She wasn't apologetic. In fact, she was glaring at him as if he were the problem. "Excuse me, ma'am," Jamal said politely, keeping his voice low. "Could you please stop kicking my seat?" Instead of an apology, she leaned forward and sneered. "Maybe if you didn't recline so much, I wouldn't have to. Some of us need space, you know." Her tone was dripping with entitlement, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. A few people glanced up from their phones and magazines, sensing the tension. Jamal straightened in his seat, deciding to brush it off. But then, as he tried to relax again, the kick started up harder this time, and that's when he heard it. Her muttered words, just under her breath, but clear enough to sting. Typical. Thinks he owns the place. Jamal's chest tightened. He knew exactly what she meant. This wasn't about legroom anymore. It was about something deeper, uglier. Jamal sat still, his mind racing. He had faced prejudice before, but there was something especially unsettling about being trapped on an airplane with nowhere to go. The constant kicking wasn't just annoying, it was humiliating. Each thud against his back felt like a challenge, a test of his patience. When a flight attendant passed by, Jamal raised his hand. "Excuse me," he said calmly. "Could you help me out here? The passenger behind me keeps kicking my seat." The attendant, a young woman with a professional smile, crouched slightly to listen. She turned to the woman and asked politely, "Ma'am, could you please stop disturbing this passenger? Everyone deserves a comfortable flight." The woman scoffed loudly, crossing her arms. "Why don't you move him somewhere else? People like him always make things difficult. I paid for this seat, and I don't want to sit behind him." Her words cut through the air like a knife. The nearby passengers froze, exchanging looks of shock. A mother sitting 2 rows over shielded her young daughter's ears, as if trying to protect her from the woman's bitterness. Jamal clenched his jaw, but stayed calm. He refused to let her drag him down to her level. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "all I've done is sit here quietly. You've been kicking my seat nonstop. That's not fair to me or anyone else on this flight." The woman leaned forward with narrowed eyes. "Maybe if you knew how to behave in public, people wouldn't have to teach you." Gasps spread through the cabin. The flight attendant's face stiffened. "Ma'am, this behavior is unacceptable," she warned. "If it continues, we'll have to take action." But the woman just smirked, convinced she was untouchable. The tension inside the cabin grew heavier with each passing minute. Jamal stayed calm, but the woman's arrogance was hard to ignore. Every time she shifted in her seat, she made sure her knee or foot pressed against his chair, as if to remind him that she wasn't backing down. Other passengers, however, had seen enough. A young woman across the aisle leaned over and whispered, "Don't let her get to you. She's completely out of line." Her voice was filled with sympathy, and Jamal nodded in thanks. Then a man seated directly behind the woman spoke up, his tone sharp. "Ma'am, could you please stop? You're disturbing everyone around you. This isn't just a problem anymore. It's affecting the whole row." But the woman whipped around and snapped, "Mind your own business. You don't know who I am. I don't have to explain myself to any of you." Ironically, she had no idea who Jamal was either. To her, he was just another passenger she thought she could push around. But Jamal wasn't just anyone. He was a respected civil rights attorney, a man who had spent his career standing up against injustice. He had handled courtroom battles far more intense than this flight, and he wasn't about to let prejudice win here either. Finally, he decided to speak. Calmly but firmly, he turned to face her. His voice was steady, his words clear. "Since you seem so concerned about who I am, let me introduce myself. My name is Jamal Carter. I'm a civil rights attorney. I've spent my life fighting against discrimination and harassment, the very thing you're doing right now. And if this behavior continues, I'll make sure it doesn't end when we land." The woman's face drained a color. For the first time, she looked speechless. The cabin seemed to shift the moment Jamal revealed who he was. Passengers who had been quietly watching now sat a little straighter, nodding in approval. The young woman across the aisle smiled, clearly relieved someone had finally stood up to the woman's cruelty. The man seated behind her muttered, "Good for you," loud enough for others to hear. The flight attendant wasted no time. She leaned down toward the woman, her professional tone sharper now. "Ma'am, you've been warned multiple times. If you continue this behavior, security will meet you at the gate when we land. This is your final warning." The woman's confidence crumbled. Her smirk disappeared, replaced by nervous glances around the cabin. She avoided Jamal's eyes completely, shrinking into her seat like a child caught misbehaving. The same woman who had been so loud and arrogant just moments ago was suddenly silent. Jamal didn't need to say another word. His calm, measured response had done more than any argument ever could. By not losing his temper, he had shown strength she couldn't match. The truth was simple. Her prejudice had only exposed her ignorance. For the rest of the flight, the atmosphere was noticeably calmer. The kicking stopped. The muttering stopped. Passengers finally relaxed, some even giving Jamal supportive nods or small smiles whenever their eyes met. Jamal leaned back, breathing deeply for the first time since the ordeal began. He didn't feel the need to gloat or lecture. Sometimes, silence was the strongest statement of all. The woman, meanwhile, sat stiff and quiet, her earlier arrogance gone. She knew she had crossed the line, and now she knew exactly who she had tried to belittle. Someone who had dedicated his life to fighting people just like her. When the plane touched down in Los Angeles, the tension everyone had felt in the cabin slowly lifted. People reached for their bags, the usual shuffle of passengers eager to leave. But this flight had been different. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something worth remembering. The woman who had spent hours kicking Jamal's seat couldn't get out fast enough. She stood up the moment the seatbelt sign turned off, snatched her bag, and hurried toward the exit without looking back. Her face was red, her eyes fixed on the floor. She had walked onto the plane with arrogance, but walked off with shame. Jamal, on the other hand, took his time. He calmly gathered his things, stood, and adjusted his jacket. He wasn't bitter, just thoughtful. Sometimes dignity was the best revenge. As he made his way down the aisle, passengers stopped him one by one. "Thank you for handling that so gracefully," an older man said, shaking his hand. "You set such an example." The young woman across the aisle added, "I don't think I could have stayed that calm." Jamal smiled. Sometimes the best way to answer hate is with composure. People expect anger. They don't know how to handle dignity. He walked off the plane, not with frustration, but with quiet pride. The woman had tried to make him feel small, but in the end, her cruelty only revealed her weakness. And his restraint showed everyone what real strength looked like. The lesson was clear to all who saw it. Never judge someone by their skin color, their seat on a plane, or your assumptions. You never know who they are, or how wrong you might be. And that's how one man turned a moment of hate into a powerful lesson. It reminds us that dignity and calm can be stronger than anger. Never underestimate who you're dealing with. You never know the battles they've already fought and won. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that keep you thinking. Until next time, thanks for watching.